Ladies and gentlemen, may we have your attention, please? The second plenary session of 7th IIMEFC and 13th ICIEF will begin shortly. Welcome back, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We shall begin to our main agenda today, the plenary session on Islamic banking and finance for economic recovery and sustainable development in digital era with the prominent speakers. Before we begin the plenary session, we would like to ask moderator and all speakers to turn their cameras on as we will have a group photo. The photo will be taken in 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone. And now we shall begin to the plenary session. To lead this discussion is Dr. Irfan Shauki Baik from Bogor Agricultural University. Before we invite our moderator, we would like to introduce him to you. Dr. Irfan Shauki Baik is an associate professor at the Department of Islamic Economics, Bogor Agricultural University. Since February 2021, Dr. Irfan serves as commissioner at the Indonesia Wakaf Board, or BWI. He received his PhD in Islamic Economics from International Islamic University Malaysia in 2010. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please welcome our moderator, Dr. Irfan Shauki Baik.
Thank you very much, Sister MC. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good afternoon in Indonesia, good morning, and good day, good night in other parts of the world. First of all, I'd like to express our gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because of His mercy, we can gather here in order to attend our second plenary session of this prestigious conference. And in this session, we are going to discuss a very important topic, which is Islamic banking and finance for economic recovery and sustainable development in digital era. And Alhamdulillah, we are honored to have distinguished speakers that will share their ideas and thought on the topic discussed. The speakers that will share their thoughts and ideas are Professor Zamir Iqbal, Professor Muhammad Maksum Billah, and Dr. Jardin Husman. Before we begin with the presentation of the first speaker, allow me to introduce you with the background of our distinguished speakers for today's plenary session. Professor Zamir Iqbal served as the Vice President, Finance and Chief Financial Officer at the Islamic Development Bank. Prior to joining this Islamic Development Bank, he served as the head of the World Bank Global Islamic Finance Development Center in Istanbul. He has more than 25 years of experience of capital market, asset management, risk management, and financial sector at the World Bank Treasury in the Washington District of Columbia. Islamic finance has been his research focus, and he has co-authored of several articles and books on Islamic finance, and he earned his PhD in international finance from the George Washington University. And the second distinguished speaker will be Professor Muhammad Maksum Billah, who is a well-known professor of finance, insurance, fintech, and investment, Islamic economic at the Islamic Economic Institute of the King Abdul Aziz University, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He is currently the member of the audit board of ACIG, which is appointed by the Saudi Monetary Authority. Professor Maksum Billah has been serving and contributing both academic as well as corporate industries and international organizations for more than 25 years. In addition, he had also been affiliated with corporate, academic, and financial industries, including central banks, international corporate organizations, governments, and the NGOs. Last but not least, we have Dr. Jardin Husman, our third panelist. She is now the Deputy Director at the Department of Islamic Economy and Finance of the Bank Indonesia. She earned her PhD in economics from the University of Warwick, United Kingdom, and graduated in the year 2015. And she has a lot of experiences. Among them are the chairman of the working group Technical Notes on Islamic Liquidity Management Tools at the Islamic Financial Services Board from July 2020 up to now. And she's also the member of Technical Committee at the Islamic Financial Services Board since May 2018. So, Alhamdulillah, with this background, I know that the discussion will be very productive. And since Professor Zamir Iqbal has an urgent matter, so after his presentation, I would like to ask the other speakers permission to give a Q&A session first for Professor Zamir Iqbal before we continue with the second and the third speakers. So hopefully you are okay with this arrangement. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Zamir Iqbal to share his ideas on the topic. And you have 20 minutes to present your paper, and allow me to remind you 2 minutes before this 20 minutes presentation ends. The time and screen are yours. فليتفضل مشكورا.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I hope you can hear me well. And I hope you can see me as well. Unfortunately, there's something issue looks like with the camera that you've not been able to. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well, Prof. Zamir.
Okay. So I don't know what's the issue with the camera because I'm putting the virtual background and it's causing somehow to freeze the camera. It's quite possible that unfortunately I am in right now I'm in traveling on business trip in Dubai, and because of that. Maybe the videos, they are being disabled over here. So anyway, I'm very sorry that I would not be aware. Somehow you cannot see me, but Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, thank you everyone. I really thank Bank Indonesia for the invitation and all the other organizers for giving me the opportunity to be with you. It is a very, very important topic, especially given that what the world has gone through in the last couple of months. So what I would like to do is just give you a flavor, an idea of what many of the Islamic countries, especially in the OIC countries, have been impacted by COVID-19 and what the Islamic Development Bank is doing in that respect, and maybe some ideas on what Islamic finance can do, or maybe going forward, how people can benefit from some of the ideas of the Islamic finance. So with that, the next slide, please. I think one thing we have a very, very clear with us that COVID-19 was totally unexpected. We were not ready for it. And this is probably in our modern history, the first crisis which was did not come from an economic or financial sector, but it impacted the economic and financial sector very much. If you look at the chart which you see on my screen, the left-hand side, you will see that the projection was that the world global GDP will continue to increase. However, when you see from 2019, we had a dip in 2020, although the recovery started, and the projections are that recovery will continue, inshallah, in 2022, but still we are not even at a stage where we would have been if there was no COVID. And the other thing is when you notice that on the chart on the right-hand side shows you that we have the emerging markets and the developing countries are the one which were hit much harder. Reason being that as you know, their economies are fragile to some extent, they're not very well developed. So therefore, they're the one who are having a slower recovery compared to the developed countries. And at the same time, there is quite a bit uncertainty on which way the recovery will go. Now, another sad part of the whole COVID-19 impact is that you probably all you are aware that the development community has a Millennium Development Goals, which were targeted to reduce the poverty, eliminate the poverty, and we were doing a very good, progress on that. However, we noticed that because of COVID, we have lost that progress which we're making to eliminate poverty, extreme poverty. And it is estimated that by probably the end of this year or so, about 100 million people will fall back into the extreme poverty. So that is not a very good news in the sense that whatever progress which was made in terms of getting people in the least developed countries outside of poverty, they are falling back on the poverty, and we do not know that how many more will fall back into the below poverty. So because of the reason that there is quite a bit kind of a diversion between the way the progress are being between the advanced countries and the developed countries, we have to see that how well our recovery goes. Move next one, please. Now, I want to share you with this particular chart. This gives you a comparison that the last great financial crisis, which happened in 2007, 8, and 9, and 10, went on. How much was the economic impact of that versus the economic impact of COVID-19? Only on over 2 years, 2020 and 2021. On the left chart tells you that how many are in terms of the billions of dollars, the comparison between the loss of economic value because of COVID versus the financial crisis. Now, one thing is very obvious, which you can see, although the overall developed countries had a certain impact, and COVID is slightly more than what the impact was on during the financial crisis. If you go down the list, and you will see that the countries like South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa, that these are the one where the COVID impact is much more than the financial crisis. One of the obvious reason is the financial crisis was primarily because of those toxic assets, and because of developed countries were engaged in those toxic assets and with high leverage. Therefore, their impact was more, but they recovered well. However, the other countries did not get much impacted because of the financial crisis, but they got hit much more because of the COVID-19. Similarly, on the right side, if you look at the chart, if you look at the impact in terms of the percentage of GDP, you will see the South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa, you will see the impact is almost more than the double. Because of the COVID. So if you look at the chart on as far as the developed countries, the world countries is concerned, their percentage of GDP has not deteriorated or impacted as much as the GDP of the developing countries and the poor countries, and this is unfortunately a very it's a very unpleasant trend. So continue, please. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at this, one of the biggest impact on the developing poor countries is that how much money they are spending in their fiscal space in order to fight the COVID-19. Of course, the whole economic activity was stopped. The government had to step in. They had to stabilize the economies. They had to provide stimuluses. That they had to do many interventions to ensure that the economies, that people's safety and security are there. However, in that during that pursuit, the developing countries end up having a very limited fiscal space. On one side, they were unable to have the revenues, the tax revenues and all these other their mode of financing. But however, I think the slides have changed. Have no, okay. So, however, on the other hand, the issue was that the countries has to either pump a lot of money or borrow money to continue surviving. So that created a big issue for the developing countries. That how do we handle this much of debt? Is this debt sustainable? Although the G20 did help with a debt service suspension initiative, which will which was run through the June of this year or so, but I'd say that gave the developing countries a little bit of breathing room, but did not help much. So the debt sustainability has created a very big problem, which is that going forward in the future, as you know, that we also have a sustainable development goals of 2030 target in our mind. So we need to make sure that to have our targets, or developing countries target is to achieve those sustainable development goals by 2030. Now, our progress in the developing countries on sustainable development goal was already below our par or below expectations. But now with the debt sustainability issue and debt overhang and so much of debt being accumulated by the developing countries, there is a serious issue that how far behind we will be in terms of meeting the sustainable development goal. Because if the countries do not have capacity to borrow more, they cannot undertake development projects. If they cannot undertake development, they have a serious issue. So I think that is one of the biggest challenge which the developing countries, especially our member countries in the Muslim countries, OIC countries, will be facing going forward. And so there is a need to address that issue very urgently. Next, please. Okay, now focusing more on the OIC countries, although we were hit pretty bad, but if we look at overall to the OIC countries, we did not do, it was kind of a less severe in terms of total loss in the output, but still we got impacted. The areas we got impacted very much, one is I mentioned this earlier on the terms of growth and poverty, and see that how we will be able to continue grow, recover where we should have been without COVID, and at the same time, as you know, that the issue is that these many of the poor people who have fallen below poverty, how do we alleviate? How do we bring them out of the poverty? What program do we provide to them in that sense? So the biggest issue going forward will be in many of these developing in our member countries OIC, which about 29 of them out of 57 member countries OIC are IDA recipient, which means that they have really very, very poor, extreme poverty issue, and they are looking for concessional finance, which means if they are looking for concessional finance, they cannot afford real, market-based finance. Second problem is you have maybe hearing this thing that many of the all over the globally, because of the government interventions, because of the supply chain disruption, the inflation is quite will be there is a fear of us facing the inflation. Although the developed countries thinks that the inflation is temporary, it will go away probably by the middle of next year, but the developing countries, we have much more, danger of inflation, and also especially for those countries who are now with the oil prices, they have a further problem with the kind of a danger or threat of inflation. Third thing is those countries who were pretty much dependent on the commodity exports, or maybe they were dependent on the tourism. And I know that Indonesia tourism is a big chunk of the economy. These are also severely hit. We don't even know how long it will take come back to the pre-COVID. Maybe we will never get a chance to get back to the pre-COVID situation. So the external accounts of the member countries, our member countries, needs to be improved, and making sure that we do not run into further difficulties or constraints. And the third thing is, I think, I mean, the fourth thing I mentioned earlier, that we have a serious issue of fiscal and debt situation, especially in developing countries. There has been a call for the debt write-offs or some rescheduling. However, we as an MDB has another challenge that we cannot do these write-offs or kind of rescheduling because it impacts us our own rating. So these are the major themes which is faced by our member countries of Islamic countries in having a robust or resilient COVID-19 recovery. Next, please. Now, I think next, I mean, again, once we know what our issues are and there are the serious challenges, question is what we could do and what we could look towards Islamic finance. Now, I think there is a lot has been written. If you recall that when the financial crisis happened, suddenly there was quite a strong interest in Islamic finance. Reason being because everyone knew the financial crisis is driven by excessive leverage, over financialization of the economies, over too much debt, and all that issues led to people appreciating what Islamic finance has to offer. Now, unfortunately, Islamic finance did not capitalize on that opportunity, and it did not catch the attention of the policymakers or the key players, and it basically continued to be ignored to some extent. However, I believe that now, unfortunately, the COVID-19 also provides us an opportunity for Islamic finance to highlight the key features of the Islamic economic and finance system, which we could learn and see that maybe we could ignore some of this. Some of the issues. So main thing, again, where Islamic finance comes into it, there are different aspects where we can benefit from Islamic finance. I mean, two key areas are very important. One is, as you know, that our economic and financial systems are very fragile because of their dependency on total debt, excessive debt, and lack of basically having some form of risk sharing with among the investors and the borrowers. So one issue is that how do we make sure that our systems going forward in the future are more resilient and are more stable? And of course, much has been written that Islamic finance, the nature of core ideas of risk sharing and the asset-based financing has the inherent features of financial sustainability, financial stability, and that's where that needs to be highlighted again. Now, although we know that we cannot change the debt overnight, but I think gradually we need to see that in our recovery or reconstruction post-COVID-19, how we could benefit from the Islamic instruments and say that we can shift towards a pure debt-based system to a more risk-sharing and asset-based system. So we need to, that's the one thing. Other idea is, other kind of a thing, again, we need to remind ourselves that because of many people getting back into poverty, Islamic values of compassion and the redistributive instruments like Islamic social finance, zakat, waqf, and all these needs to be strengthened. Means that all these can be targeted towards addressing the alleviation of poverty. I mean, many studies have done, but I recall in a previous place at the World Bank, we did a study which showed that if just zakat alone was collected in a certain fashion, in correctly, and it was able to implement it correctly, it can alleviate poverty in probably more than 50% of the OIC member countries. So I think these are the things we need to remind ourselves again, that what we need to do to revive and present to the world that what good features of Islamic finance and the idea of economic and social justice can be, should not be ignored in our reconstruction post-COVID-19. Next, please. Now, there is many areas where we can talk about the Islamic finance for recovery. I mentioned about the debt sustainability and seeing that how in the long term we could use the risk sharing for reconstruction of resilient and sustainable infrastructure. As you may have known that one of the focus by the G20 and other MDBs is that yes, we need to we need to have a recovery from COVID-19, but that recovery has to be sustainable, resilient, and green. So all these things are the wish list of the top policymakers. So, but we when look at Islamic finance does provide sustainability. It does provide a resilience because it has the whole aspect of a risk sharing and asset based finance has a built-in resilience. And the third thing is green, and of course our emphasis on the protection of the environment and all this thing gives us a very, very strong argument why Islamic finance should not be a tool for building a sustainable, resilient, and the green economies. So that's as we reach into that sustainability, serious discussion should happen that how do we avoid our dependency on debt and how do we promote Islamic finance instruments. Second, again, thing is how do we build resilience? One of the hardest hit sectors in COVID-19 was in those entrepreneurs which were either women, youth, or minorities, and they were hardly hit, and SMEs. So what we had to see what we could do taking Islamic finance to make sure that we help these particular sectors in building the engine for the growth, which is through SMEs. And third, I mentioned about the poverty alleviation. We need to look at these core Islamic social finance instruments and make sure that they are used optimally so that we can again get back to reviving our target of taking people out of poverty at a shortest period of time. And also sharing the sharing the prosperity. Now, I would just like very quickly to say that when we at Islamic Development Bank, when the COVID-19 happened, we were one of the very early MDBs who immediately started to come up with a very comprehensive program. As you know, that all of our operations are Sharia compliant, and we have a next slide, please. So we undertook a very comprehensive program. So we came up with the 3 R's. Our total package for our member country amounts to about 4.6 billion. And then we call it as a strategic response and preparedness program. And that had 3 R's. So all these 3 R's was targeted towards short term, medium term, and long term. Idea was immediately respond to get the member countries respond to the health emergencies and minimize any life and economic activity. The medium term was how do we restore the economies, especially focusing on the micro and SME sector. And the third, the long term was how do we restart? How do we restart, help our member countries towards building sustainable, resilient, and green economy? So we focus basically on these 3 R's to make sure that we are provide the best response to our member countries. Next, please.
You have 1 more minute, Prof.
Thank you. I'm almost there. This is the last slide. So I think to recap from what I have mentioned here, although there are many things which we need to do. Of course, I would not re-emphasize the issue with the debt crisis which our OIC countries are facing. Of course, the public sector has to step in and rescue and do all the intervention and to act as make sure that they protect the economy. This is very important that all the policy makers do have a certain coordination with each other. All the MDBs during the COVID-19 were very much on together discussing through G20 platform or so, and they were all together on many of these intervention in agreeing what the recovery would be. So I will summarize that the Islamic finance is opportunity is there. As I said, there was great opportunity for Islamic finance to prove itself after the financial crisis of 2007-8, but unfortunately, Islamic finance did not capitalize on it. However, I think this is now another historic moment for Islamic finance to step up for two reasons. One is, of course, we have a serious issue of debt sustainability, which we need to we are facing, and we need to tackle it. Second thing is, with the ongoing rapid development in the technology and fintech, it gives another vehicle to Islamic finance, that how the use of fintech can minimize the asymmetrical information, to which helps to promote risk sharing and entrepreneurship. I think if we go back to the economic theory, because of information asymmetry, the lender prefers debt over an equity or risk sharing contract. But if because of fintech, if we have all the information available and the information asymmetry is gone, then there's a much more, a lender is much more conducive or much more willing to go into an asset-based and risk-sharing contract. So I think given the developments in the financial technology, very developed, I think there's a historical opportunity for Islamic finance. And last is, I know that we or many of our member countries are already very, very active in zakat and awqaf. I know Indonesia and Malaysia has a very strong, building of awqaf instrument. However, I think many of these countries or many of these economies do have a governance issues of these instruments. So we need to address those to ensure that we maximize the utility from these things. And we cannot ignore the poor. We cannot ignore the progress made in the last few years to take people outside of poverty. But I think we need to focus on poverty as well. So with that, I really appreciate your patience, and I will stop here. And again, I apologize that unfortunately, I have another meeting after this. So because of that, then I will have to excuse myself. But I'll very happy to take any questions from the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Zamir Iqbal, for your insightful presentation. And we have received a lot of useful and beneficial information. And for the audience, for all participants, if you have a question, you may put the questions on the chat box. So we are going to open the Q&A session with Prof. Zamir Iqbal. So, Prof, regarding your presentation, you mentioned about the debt crisis, and the fiscal space needs to be created via debt relief or write-off for developing countries. So according to your opinion, how we are going to do that? How to ensure that the write-off can be done, for the developing countries? And the second question from Sister Putri, she asked the question about risk-sharing instrument. Applying risk-sharing instrument entails a framework that centers on job or real sector creation, not the money creation. Thus, what is your suggestion to handle the upcoming inflation threat and debt trap, for developing countries? So maybe these two questions, you may answer this, Prof.
Sure. Thank you so much. Now, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, that the issue of the debt cannot be done overnight. And the debt write-off is not an option, an easy option which we could do. during when the crisis happened, the G20 was asked to even delay the debt. So there was an initiative. All the MDBs are asked to do a debt suspension of so given the idea was that developing countries should have more breathing space, and and they should not be spending money on the debt servicing and this and that. And G20 on that matter did suspend the debt. However, we as MDB we could not. So I think my view over here is it's not going to happen overnight, but we should start preparing ourselves that why do we borrow the money? If we borrow money for development projects, why going forward we cannot borrow that or raise that money and mobilize that money on a more project finance or based on the risk sharing. Means that if we are able to, because the whole building of the infrastructure, health infrastructure, the hospitals which will be needed after post COVID-19, and strengthened or resilient healthcare system and education system, that can be done very much in terms of a based on the either Islamic asset-based instruments or purely on the risk sharing. So if these products become much more mature, and I think there over the period of time, many of the investors are becoming more comfortable with these. But main again thing is that if there is a well-developed ecosystem in which these instruments could be applied, investor will be very willing to participate in these things. Problem that happens because many of the developing countries, there is no ecosystem for the transparent implementation of the projects. And so because of that, investor doesn't want to go off. So my view over here is, it's not going to happen overnight. We need to do it gradually. And for that matter, the Muslim countries, they should realize that going forward, they should have less reliance on the debt and have more incoming investment, which are based on more where the borrower and the lender has some form of risk sharing with each other. That's the one thing I can suggest. Now, other thing, again, I think this will also mention about the risk sharing. Now, I think maybe I want to say that when we talk about Islamic finance, it's not only risk sharing, it's also about the asset-based financing. For example, we as the IDB, we issue sukuk, and the difference between our sukuk and a conventional bond is that our sukuk is backed by our projects, which means that we invest money in our developing countries to build the economic infrastructure, and we take those projects and we securitize those and we issue the sukuk. So which means that it's not only a pure risk sharing, and some people think it's Islamic finance is only about the risk sharing of equity-based finances. So no, it is also an asset-based finance, which means that any money which is mobilized have to be followed by a real economic the projects. So from that matter, I think my response would be that we need to come up with a more innovative sukuk where we could securitize some of the assets in different countries, put them together, and also use that mechanism of sukuk to issue the marketable securities to the global and financial markets, but those money is actually used for the actual development of the project, for building of the infrastructure. So I hope I answered those questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof. Zamir Iqbal, for your answers, and thank you again for sharing your ideas here. And we wish your success in your further program. Thank you very much, Prof. Zamir Iqbal. And now, okay, thank you. And now we are going to continue with the second speaker, which is Professor Muhammad Ma'asum Billah. Professor Ma'asum Billah, without further ado, I would like to invite you to the stage. So the time and screen are yours. Please unmute yourself, Prof.
Is this okay, clear now?
Yes, clear, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irfan Shawgi. In fact, I just want to continue with whatever Prof. Jamir Iqbal shared. In my discussion, there are 5 points that I'm going to stress to. The first question in mind is what is the impact of economic impact of COVID-19? So just I have to glance through, and now what is the strength of Islamic economics and finance in the global economic concern? And third point that I'm going to stress is if based on the existing strength or the capacity of Islamic economics and finance, can it contribute to the economic recovery and sustainability? Then if yes, then what is the master plan of it and in this digital era and its action plan? So these 5 points that I'm going to share with you. Now, as we know that in reference to the World Bank data, this in 2020, I'm going to highlight here about 10 top 10 economic countries like United States, Japan, and so on. So for the last 5 years, effective from 2016 to the early 2020, the average growth rate was quite significant. And but unfortunately, due to the heat of the COVID-19, the total growth rate has been crashed. And in those 10 countries that I have listed here is all decline, and the annual return rate average is minus about 12.2%. So in other words, to sum up here, due to COVID, this pandemic, the economic growth, the GDP is seriously affected. The decline. So now, in this particular situation, what is the stand of Islamic economics and finance? Now, as you know, that today, just want to trust here that we have about 526 Islamic banks globally. Besides, we have other financial institutions based on the Sharia principles, and the total asset size is about 2.4 trillion, which is compared to very small. The conventional is about 22.5 trillion. And the growth rate of Islamic finance is about annually about 14%, compared to conventional one, which is about 9.9%. So the total global banking market share is held. The 6% of the total global banking market share is about is held by the Islamic finance. Now, the uniqueness in Islamic finance, we have, let's say, as Professor Jamir Iqbal also mentioned just now, is Islamic banking or Islamic finance is based or asset-based with risk sharing, whereas the conventional is a debt-based with risk transferring. Now, the uniqueness here, that there are few uniqueness actually. Among them is the Islamic finance is based on is asset-based and risk sharing. Now, the rate of return that we have realized that today, even despite the COVID, the hit by the COVID, the rate of return is about 6 to 15%, depending on the products and services. So they vary, minus zakat. So in other words, to sum up here, that actually Islamic finance, even though there is a very small in the global market share, but it has the strength because of it has the uniqueness with some characteristics that it is based on the asset based, and also it has the risk sharing, the mechanisms, etc., etc. So now this is the capacity of Islamic finance. Now the issue here whether within this particular capacity can contribute to the global economic recovery and sustainability affected by COVID-19? Answer is yes. With further action plan or restructuring, rebranding. So there are four strategies that I have highlighted here, mainly the core four strategies. First is there should be a rebranding in Islamic financial products and services. Secondly, there should be innovative products foreseeing the digital era. Because if we rely on what we have, even though the Islamic financial products and services is asset-based, risk sharing, etc., but yet we cannot take for granted. Due to the COVID-19, whatever had happened, we need to wake up, and it has to be with a new dimension. So now, third is the dynamism in services, the professionalism, etc. And the fourth is the discovery of emerging markets. So these are the four core components or the four strategies that we need to focus in order for us to for Islamic finance, or Islamic economics and finance to stand firm to contribute whatever percentage or whatever the size can be able to contribute to the global economic recovery at this moment. Now, once we confirm that Islamic finance, Islamic economics have the ability to contribute to the global economic recovery and sustainability, now the master plan. These are the master plan actually of Islamic economic finance that we need to have the strategize, and that is what we could suggest here, that there should be strategic restructuring of social finance. Social finance here, as Professor Zamir Iqbal also mentioned, that if zakat itself, zakat, awqaf, tabarruat, the hiba, etc., cannot be seen as satisfying the beggars only. That is the traditional mindset. So we have to wake up. We have to change the dimension that zakat is not meant to satisfy the beggars only, or the awqaf, okay? But it has the strength or the capacity, okay, to contribute significantly to the global economic boost. So as Professor Zamir Iqbal mentioned, that if zakat alone, if we have the good management and structuring, restructuring, it can resolve at least 50% of the poverty rate in the OIC countries. Is how great message. Similarly, zakat, awqaf itself, the institution of awqaf itself, it is not only to satisfy the poverty, the poor, at the micro level, but it has the greater meaning actually, and then the results. If we really restructure, rebrand awqaf itself, can really play a greater role towards not only to reduce the poverty rates, but it will also strengthen the global economy in terms of the poverty can be entrepreneurs and the national development and many other aspects. So, and third issue, the temporary awqaf. I have an assessment, and I have studied this particular issue, the temporary awqaf, and then some scholars conclude that this is maniha, So now, temporary awqaf itself can play a greater role towards the economic recovery, but we need to really create a mindset how we can restructure and rebrand temporary awqaf, and it has to have the government corporation, the cooperation, industrial cooperation, and this players cooperation. So if we really have the focus and focus on those other social finance aspects that I have listed here, I think this is enough. Even if we can have a 25% of what I have listed here, I think this will be good enough for us for the Islamic finance or the Islamic economies to contribute significantly to the global economic recovery and sustainability. There are some others also, hiba, qard hasana, sukuk al-intifa, that is led by awqaf, that could play a much greater role than BOT, build, operate, and transfer, that mechanism that is under conventional. But from my own study, sukuk al-intifa led by awqaf can play a much greater and significant role in the national development. Then SRI Sukuk, then the financial mechanism based on the VBI, and CSR based on the Sharia principles, of course involves the zakat and awqaf and so on. Green finance, cooperative micro sukuk. I have another study that when the article was being published on this issue. Through the model of cooperative micro sukuk, any country that Professor Jamir Iqbal also stressed that we have to refrain ourselves. I mean the countries from the debt, the physical debt. So now cooperative micro sukuk is on an alternative which can help the government, any government, especially the third world countries, help from refrain from any debts from World Bank, IIMEF, whatever it is, Asian Development Bank, and can rely on their own internal economy to develop any mega or semi-mega projects of the country, even the public sector or the private sectors. So this cooperative micro sukuk model alone. Next here is the professional development. All levels of tertiary and professional education shall keep a prime target in mind by focusing on professional building with enterprising and entrepreneurial mindset. As we know that until today, that in many situations that we have encountered, that the education system, we are training children based on some notes, some literature, some internet search, etc. But we have to really change the dimension now. We have to change the mindset of the facilitators to train our children that how to be how to create them, how to ensure a professional building, true professional building, with how to be an entrepreneur and enterprising. So now it's not like memorizing and writing in the exam, but we have to create them active and proactive, and also with the mindset of how to be an entrepreneur and with enterprising personality. So this is one of the issue that we need to focus. Then maximizing the digitalization. Here, digitalization of fintech. We have many components until now. Unfortunately, there are many issues like artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain technology, machine learning, IoT, and so on. So those are the components are available. The conventional banking and financial systems are maximizing their opportunities, but the Islamic finance and economic environment, they should maximize the opportunities with the digital infrastructure in our Islamic in the Islamic and financial the products and services, so that this is another way that boost and that strengthen the Islamic economics and finance to contribute to the global economic progress, inshallah. Then the rebranding by focusing emerging market and the marketing dimension with innovative strategies. So the marketing cannot be like we have to change the total system, the total mechanism that we need to review and restructure. So in order for the Islamic finance or economics to stand in the global and at this situation to contribute to the global economic recovery and sustainability. Next, here is the creating innovative eco-culture. Goodbye to the debt-based economy, as Prof. Jamir Iqbal also stressed on that issue, that of course it is not within 24 hours that we can do, but it is a gradual effect. But we need to create a mindset that we are going towards that journey, and destination is when we achieve the fully or the 100%. So in other words, the Islamic economics and finance must struggle hard to how to say goodbye to debt-based economy. Of course, until now, we are not fully yet, but we have to have the mindset how to go gradually. The appreciating and promoting asset-based economy, while goodbye to the risk-transferring economy and appreciating the risk-sharing economy. These are the core dimensions that we need to have a mindset that we need to go for this in order for us to make sure that the Islamic economics and finance can sustain, can stand in the global market with sustainability and contribute significantly. Building creative generation and cooperation, but not competition, and strategizing the cooperative microfinance and microeconomics, that we have the microcredit, etc., etc. We have to wake up that microcredit is not a solution. Social business that we have seen is a debt-based. It's not a solution. So now we need to change the dimension how we can promote the cooperative-based microfinance, microeconomics. Now the action plan. We have 12 action plan.
You have more, Prof? You have
yes, 12
2 minutes. 2 minutes more. Yes.
Yes, 12 action plan here. Of course, we have those are the issues that I am going to highlight here. But all those exist today. But we need to review and re-emphasize. Okay. Step 1 is the law and policies. Step 2, rebranding. Step 3 is the effective professional and the capacity building. Step 4 is the strategic action plan. Step 5 is the professional dynamism. And step 6, review and accountability. Step 7 is innovative culture. Step 8 is the maximizing the fintech and digital outreach, that artificial intelligence in our products and services, that how we can maximize those, digital infrastructure, artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning, IoT, blockchain, etc., etc. And then the step 9 is the fair distribution with care and concern. Step 10 is the cooperative culture, and next is the recognition and rewards, and the last but not least, the quality and effective research and development. Now, mind mapping, the last but not least. Here, Islamic finance and economics stand on its own unique character and dynamism. It is undoubtedly admitted. Now, despite Islamic economics and finance have the capacity, outlook capacity, it's very small, but it has the unique capacity and which enable it to stand firm to contribute to the global eco-recovery with sustainability. As I mentioned, that asset-based economy and also risk sharing. So if we can continue this particular, if Islamic finance and economics can continue with this particular dimension alone, can help the Islamic economics and finance stand with sustainability and contribute to the global economic recovery and economic the upgrade. Next, here is the Islamic economics and finance strategic master plan shall be with rebranding, restructuring, innovation. It cannot be like copy and paste. It has to be with a new dimension. We have to move from the existing to something that can have the impact, the long-term impact. Then the next here is the social finance that I mentioned here, zakat, awqaf. They cannot be seen as an instrument for satisfying the beggars. They have to be dynamically and strategically structured and rebranded so that can help the global economic recovery with sustainability and the zakat, awqaf, etc., as I outlined earlier. Now, the maximizing the fintech and digitalization of IEF, as I mentioned, that this is another way that can help the Islamic economics and finance to be at par with the conventional, though is a long-term plan. Now, the last but not least here, there should be a cooperation, not competition. Unfortunately, the Islamic finance, there are many countries whereby the country, even within the country, they're competing each other. Unhealthy competitions. Healthy competition is fine. Unhealthy competition to destroy another the entity, etc. So there should not be any competition. There should be a cooperation. This will help to boost the Islamic economics and finance and stand firmly with sustainability and contribute to the world economic recovery and economic upbringing, inshallah. With that, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation. And for the last speaker, I would like to invite Dr. Jardine to present your thoughts on this issue. So the time and screen are yours.
Thank you, Dr. Irfan, as the moderator. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to thank the committee to have invited me to contribute in this prestigious event. And thank you, Professor Maksum Bilal. Your thought is very insightful. And I completely agree with Professor Maksum Bilal and Professor Zambik Iqbal previously, how the importance of the Islamic finance, especially in time of this economic recovery, is need to be more elaborate and need to have a different approach, a different point of view. Next slide, please. I would like to talk about the role of Islamic finance and how BI strategy include the development of Islamic finance commercially and socially, because we've seen, as Professor Maksum Bilal already said, the important role of Islamic finance in developing the economy as a whole, and holistic and inclusive. Next slide. Before going to the main topics of the role of Islamic finance, let's take a quick look, a very basic philosophy of the Islamic economic itself. I'm fully aware that there are many other angles or concepts on how to put this into a framework, but allow me to put it simply as this way. The main message of this slide is this simple framework that Islamic economy as a system cannot be separated from the behavior of the Islamic agent itself. Thus, in order to achieve the balance and inclusive economic growth, to optimize the role of Islamic economy, Islamic principle, Islamic finance itself, every action of the economic agents matters. Next slide. Now, what makes an economic activity prohibited by the Islamic rules? Just want to take a look from this side. It's simply because of its substance itself is haram, or we can say halam li zatihi, or the process or the mechanism that make the transaction or activities are considered prohibited. Exploitation, as previously mentioned by Professor Iqbal and Professor Maksum Bilal, how the risk transfer, the riba, harm for the economy, that's why it's prohibited by the Islamic principles. Next slide. Still based on the identification of the previous slides, we could simply put the concept this way by clustering or grouping the aspect that to be addressed in considering Sharia compliance in every activities or business. For simplicity, we group it based on three dimensions. First, the product dimension itself, as mentioned previously. We need this comprehensive approach because in order to develop Islamic economy and finance, the role of these three dimensions cannot be separated. First, the product dimension, which is in nowadays, and the first day, we also talk about halal industry. Here, we also consider it, but some products, it's not. That doesn't necessarily have to be halal certified, but it does not contain any haram substance. It's just a simplification, but we just take out all the 100% is prohibited and actually haram from the substance. And second, we need to consider the source of the financing. So every transaction, every production activity, not only we take care about the product itself, but also where is the source of the financing. As Professor Maksum Bilal also said, that we need to take a look deeper and how we use Islamic finance differently to make the value of the principle of Islamic finance fulfilled. So here, after we take care of the product itself, and we could see from the source of dimension, and last but not least, and how we conduct the business itself. Now, these principles is in line with nowadays the mainstream concept about the ESG, environment, social governance. In Islamic principle is already in conformity with Islamic principles like business ethics and why we care about each other's social concern, and of course about environmental. And Dr. Zamir Iqbal also said, and also the previous Professor Masum about green finance. This also we take into consideration the three dimensions of each business activity. Next slide. To go further on the dimension of business conduct, we could see that it basically embraced the concept of how Islamic worldview of preserving the nature, how Sharia value affect business ethics, how these concepts are in accordance with the green growth, SDGs, and end up with achieving the objective of the Sharia or the Maqasid Sharia. So I would like to emphasize that the concept, the Islamic value, already embrace the nowadays concept of green finance, how we take care about the environmental, how we try to mitigate the risk from the climate change, is already in line with the Islamic principles. Next slide. This only reiterate the meaning of the how many mainstream concept is already in line with the Islamic principle in all those three dimensions. Each dimension of the Sharia business activity basically has an implementation that is in line with and intersect with the mainstream economic practice, like nowadays. Next slide. Next slide, we're going to be the next section. Now, with this slide, I want to take our attention to a broader point of view of the source of financing, the second dimension that we already talked about. When we talk about credit or financing, our thoughts are limited to bank credit or other financial services products institution. In fact, if we look at it based on the broader definition, the source of economic financing includes all the money supply used to facilitate all economic activities. So I know that I'm taking the same point of view with the mainstream economic. I just want to elaborate, even with the same perspective, we still miss something. So based on the system of national account, there are 8 sectors to be identified with 8 financial instruments. But hence that Islamic financial instruments already implicitly included, although of course with different contracts and with different feature. However, the identification is a challenge that must be answered, especially is how to identify Islamic social finance in national or nationwide point of view as in this mechanism. Why we need to identify it? In order to evaluate it, in order to make it the whole as in line with the national policy, we need to have tools to evaluate it, to measure the role of Islamic finance, especially Islamic social finance, to the society in a national perspective. Next slide. just reiterating all the speakers already said, that how Islamic finance basically fulfill and make it complete, or the function of Islamic finance to facilitate the economy. So the inclusion of Islamic social finance make the inclusion being holistic, not only for the financial inclusion, but also from social inclusion to the growth inclusion. With the existence of Islamic social finance, the role of the financial sector in facilitating the needs of the real sector become complete. And next slide. Next slide again. Okay. Now we are going to, I will briefly explain what Bank Indonesia program in developing Sharia economics and finance. Next slide. We briefly just, I want to inform again the audience here. After we have really looked at the concept of the role of I want to briefly take a look what the objective of central bank and why Bank Indonesia also concerned with the development of Sharia economic and finance. In achieving its objective in maintaining the rupiah value stability, Bank Indonesia is supported by these three pillars, namely formulating, implementing monetary policy, regulating and maintaining payment system availability, and preserving the financial system stability. Next slide. And in implementing this policy, Bank Indonesia also employ a policy mix framework where the monetary, macroprudential, and payment system policy supported, and also, among others, with the Sharia economic and financial policy. So we see that the Sharia economy and finance as a new source of growth and part of the structural reform. It plays an important role in the national economy, that it should be addressed with the nationwide policy. Next slide. Now, knowing the urgency of the Sharia economy and finance, Bank Indonesia prepared a blueprint to support the Sharia economic finance development nationally in Indonesia with these three pillars. First, economic empowerment, and then the second about the Sharia financial market deepening, because Bank Indonesia is a regulatory in the financial market, and last but not least, strengthening the research capacity of education for Islamic education. Next slide. Next slide again. Sorry. These three pillars are interlinked together, where the development of the Sharia business empowerment is supposed to supported by Sharia financing. So it cannot be separated. We develop the Sharia finance to facilitate the economy, and we develop the economy through facilitating by the Sharia finance. And these three pillars are highly dependent on. The third pillar is about how to increase Islamic economic literacy, both for the producer and the consumer alike, to make these development frameworks more optimal. And next slide. Now we focus on the second pillar, namely for the Sharia is finance, Sharia financial market deepening. In Bank Indonesia, we not only look at the commercial side, but also we really understand and take it seriously about the Islamic social finance. And Professor Masum Bilal has already mentioned how to make a new perspective, a new instrument that can maximize the utilization of the of the financial instrument for the betterment of the economy. So not only taking care of the commercial side, but we also integrate. We currently maybe Professor Masum Bilal also already knew that in Indonesia, we developed this cash wakaf linked sukuk, using it. Basically, it's a temporary wakaf, as you already mentioned. So to in order for the people, for not only but the public, but also the society can take a contribution by wakaf temporarily for economic development into the national, include in the national program. Next slide. This is only the elaboration of the monetary policy and the macroprudential policy that is compliant with Sharia principle that are conducted by Bank Indonesia in part of the policy. Next slide. So, in contrast to the money market in general, Islamic money market deepening is carried out entirely to support financing. So basically, it is only for the purpose of effective liquidity management in this term. So we need to understand that the participation of Islamic banks in the money market is basically only for liquidity management, not for profit taking. But the end, the ultimate target is how to support the financing for the real sector by managing the liquidity. Next slide. These slides, I'm going to have a very quick look about how the framework of the policy mix implemented by Bank Indonesia. So the Sharia monetary policy and the Sharia macroprudential policy are supported by Sharia economic development inclusively. So what makes it different with the conventional one? In here, we also take into the consideration the real economic sides. So we also develop the Sharia economy and put it in the as one of the component in our policy mix. As we are aware, according to Sharia principle, the financial transaction cannot be separated from the real sector transaction. Thus, the policy mix also include the Sharia, the real economy development inside the policy mix. So next slide.
2 more minutes, Dr. Jadir.
Thank you. This slide is only explain the role of Islamic social finance in the mainstream policy. It supports the liquidity management, so it encourages the flow of funds to the productive sector, and it's also function as the alternative source on inclusive financing, and of course is increase the purchasing power of the poor from the distributive function of Islamic social finance. So next slide. Here I'm just going to show that Indonesia is unique because Indonesia is the biggest network of financial inclusion, Islamic financial inclusion. So not the volume of the assets or the volume of the transaction, but it's more of the inclusiveness of the network and to serve the needs of the society. That's what makes Islamic finance in Indonesia is unique and one of the advantage that we have. Next slide. This is only try to one of the example how we measure the coverage of Islamic finance, not only based on the Islamic financial service institution, but also from the other sectors in the economy. So let me include by the last, next slide. I think this is not the final one. So yes, basically I want to make a summary that the assessment of conformity and Sharia principle need to be carried out comprehensively. In the dimension of financing resource, compliance with Sharia principle does not only include sources of financial originating from the Islamic financial service institution. And third, the comprehensive approach must continue to be updated according to the dynamics of the development of economic activity in the three dimensions of Sharia business activity, in particular with the advancement of digital innovation in the economy. I believe with the continued updating with a holistic approach, we could optimize the role of Islamic finance, especially in time of recovery like now. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for your enlightening presentation, Dr. Jardin. And please give virtual applause for our distinguished speakers, Prof. Ma'asum Billah and Dr. Jardin Husman. Okay, now we come to the second session, which is the Q&A session. And if you want to raise question, you may put it in the chat box. And so far we have 3 questions in the chat box, 2 and 1 is directly sent to me. Okay, the first question is from Brother Abdul, that the question is directed to Professor Ma'asum Billah. Yeah, Prof. Ma'asum Billah, I personally agree that we need to develop Islamic social finance, because even though an economy is strong, there are always low-income groups that need to be serviced and helped. However, we cannot rely on market for this service. What is the best way to perform such service for the lower-income group? And then the second question, again for Professor Ma'asum Billah. Yeah, Assalamualaikum, Prof. Ma'asum. I want to ask how we prepare the next generation of Islam economics to come, especially in terms of education, and also whether formal education in Islam economics is the way forward to build an Islam economy, or is there another serious thing we need to think about to build an Islam economy? Hopefully you understand the question, yeah. And then the third question is from Brother Astandi Dinorian. The question is, this can also be answered by Dr. Jardin. Is there a right time to implement the zakat system in Indonesia? If so, when is the right time for zakat to replace taxes? Yeah. Okay. And one more for Dr. Jardin. The question is, how far is the progress of the so-called inclusive Sharia development in Indonesia? So I think each of you have 2 questions that need to be answered. So the first opportunity will be given to Professor Ma'asum Billah. Prof, you may answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irfan. I truly appreciate these 2 questions. First question is the social finance. Yes, I truly agree that due to the not only COVID-19, but also earlier, it has been a concern, serious concern, that Islamic finance or Islamic economics cannot be seen as a commercial vehicle only to gain commercially, but it is an integrated system, the package, and it will be enlightening facilitated by this effective social financial structure. So in other words, here, as I mentioned, the zakat, awqaf, fitra, and the different type of sukuk, which are related to social finance and so on. So now we need to, the Islamic economics and the Islamic finance, financial industries need to emphasize, or the economics industry also emphasize, how we can review and restructure the Islamic financial, social financial components. So this is very important, that can help to upgrade the economic status of the global market, of the globe, and also to help significantly to the economic recovery and sustainability, inshallah. So that's why we have to go for the sectorial infrastructure or the restructure and the zakat, the awqaf, and so on. So it's a very careful way that those components cannot be seen as this exit point for the satisfying the beggars, but those components shall be valued as an able and the able components in the Islamic economic environment or the financial environment of the world to help the economic status of the globe. Next question here, the next generation that our brother or sister mentioned here, how we can develop. Among others, first is we need to emphasize how to create an effective capacity building atmosphere. It's not, we have to shift from the traditional mechanisms of teaching and research. We have to come up with a mechanism and to adopt a mechanism, effective mechanism can create a real professionals. That is, in other words, a capacity building. So if we can ensure that our capacity building is an effective or the impact, okay, then we will ensure the growth and the sustainability of Islamic economics and finance the time ahead, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, to emphasize here, we have to really re-emphasize, redevelop the strategies of teaching, research, and professional development that can have an impact and can create a generation with skills and professionalism. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Thank you very much, Prof. Maksum. Now, I would like to give the opportunity for Dr. Jardin to respond to the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irfan. Question is about whether I believe this is the right time for the zakat to replace the tax system. Yeah, that's a very conceptually. I think Dr. Irfan also have many ideas about this, even more than me. I believe that the zakat is very important instrument, and as we also know, that's why before we implemented, zakat, let alone replace the tax system. Before we implemented, as Dr. Masambila also said, zakat is very powerful, but we need to make a very good preparation. First of all, of course, how we take into seriously the management of zakat, the level of governance. That's why we, together with Basnas and others, developed the zakat core principle to ensure the governance of the zakat, to make it the management is transparent. And also in my slide previously, I also mentioned we need to identify the zakat itself in the statistic of our macroeconomic data, to make an elaboration, to evaluate deeply how effective or what can how much we should increase the effectiveness of zakat before we really take zakat into the national policy instruments and to optimize the functions of zakat itself, which is, I believe, is complement with other instrument of Islamic social finance, is most powerful for the economy, especially in time to mitigate the risk and to fight the inequality in the society. So the preparation should be there. We need to very serious in managing the zakat fund, and we need to educate, as Professor Mafsumbila also said. We need to increase and enhance, strengthening our human capital in managing the Islamic social finance in order for we serve the benefits of the instruments itself, in order we take this amanah very seriously. I think that's what needs to be done first. About the second question, can you repeat it again, Dr. Irfan?
How far is the progress of the so-called Sharia inclusive economic development?
Oh, yeah.
Sharia economic development. How far is the progress in Indonesia?
Thank you so much. Yes, as I mentioned in my slides, in part of the Islamic finance, so Indonesia is the #1 in Islamic financial inclusion. But talking about the development of economic inclusion, that's why we need to, like Professor Masubil also said, the entrepreneurship. We need to teach. We need to strengthen the society itself, so that each agent can have its part in the economic activities. So, if you're talking about how far, now we are hand in hand together, developing the Islamic economic inclusively. In our blueprint, we have one pillar focusing on economic empowerment, and we haven't measured exactly the percentage change from before we take this strategy into national strategy, but we are seeing that now there's an increase in the capacity of the human resource in doing business, and the SMEs we facilitate the SMEs to strengthen their capacity to be able to increase their competitiveness. So yes, we think we are in the right path, and we still have a lot of things to do in the future, and we believe that with working together, this program will be more beneficial for everyone. I think that's from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jardin. We have 10 more minutes, before we end this session, and we have 2 questions for you, Dr. Jardin, from Sister Putri. The first question is, what is central bank position on creating instruments that influence liquidity preference based on asset base or job creation? And the second question is, do you think pegging low and stable interest would eventually eliminate the powers that are currently in the policies for full employment? So what is Bank Indonesia's take on this perspective? So you may answer this, Dr. Jardin.
So one is the preference of the...
So creating instruments that influence liquidity preference based on asset creation, asset base or job creation. That is the question here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we although we are regulators in the money market, which is its asset in the money market is asset less than 1 year or very short term. That's why we manage the liquidity management. But of course, because we want to support the economic development, we need a longer term instrument, as you already mentioned, Sister Putri. That's why in our policy, we have this Bank Indonesia Sukuk. Basically Bank Indonesia Sukuk has a long-term asset-backed Sukuk from the global Sukuk or from the sovereign Sukuk of the government, and to finance long-term projects. But then we manage it together, and we restructure it to provide a liquidity management for the financial market. That's we do our part in the money market, but we also encourage the long-term assets, the long-term underlying to serve, to finance long-term projects. That's the policy that we are taking right now. And for the second question, can you repeat it again? Sorry.
Yes.
Dr. Irfan?
Yes. Pegging the low and stable interest would eventually eliminate the powers that are currently hinder policies for full employment. What is Bank Indonesia's take on this perspective?
Interesting. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think now we have a low interest rate that we are intent to to have a policy or low policy rate to support the economic activity. So we, as you already know, by lowering the interest rate, we are lowering the cost of capital, cost of financing, and we also done these matters in the different mechanism, but with the same because we have a single objective. So we with the same policy signal for the Islamic finance as well. So we believe, of course, we are a small open economy, and we are an open economy. So in order to have the balance between lower interest rate makes financing cheaper, but also we have to maintain the stability of our exchange rate to strike the balance between the capital flows. So, but of course, we believe that by having a low interest rate, and of course, we need to see what's the economy situation or condition right now, how the economy develops, whether we are in the problem of demand or supply. But we believe by striking the balance, having a lower interest rate, but also maintaining the stability by taking into account the capital flows that flowing, and also the inflation rate. We believe that this not only the instruments. That's why we have a policy mix. We not only believe that one policy rate can handle all economic problem. That's why we have a policy mix. We also take into account the financial stability, and as I mentioned earlier, we also do a policy for economic empowerment to create economy inclusively, and to create a job vacancy to mitigate the risk of unemployment. I think that's what I can explain. Thank you so much, Dr. Irfan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jardine, for your response to the questions. And since I think we don't have time again for the session for Q&A session, so we still have 3 minutes. Now I would like to divide this 1 minute for Prof. Masum Billah and 1 minute for Dr. Jardine to make a closing statement. Okay, 1 minute first to Prof. Masum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irfan, and respected organizer, and also my beloved participants, and my respected colleague, scholar, Doctor, for her excellent lecture. I truly appreciate, and we hope that we will progress further, inshallah, with our humble contribution for the development of Islamic economics and finance, especially in this particular crucial era. There are two eras affected by the COVID-19 and also the advancement of financial technology, fintech, or the digital era. Thank you very much. Once again, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam warahmatullah. Thank you, Prof. Masum Billah. Dr. Jardin, 1 minute.
Thank you, Dr. Irfan. I also want to thank Professor Masum Bilal. I learned so much today, and I want to thank the participants and the committee, the organizer, and of course the moderator as well, in very fruitful discussion. I just want to say that as we also believe that Sharia values, Sharia principles have a very high value, and we are the one who have to deliver. We have to preserve. We have to do the amanah. That's why we need to take a continuous improvement, continuous enrichment. Not only in part of in the financial sector, also in the real sector, and and also catching up with the development out there, that we also can take benefit in every good every broad development that already in accordance with the Sharia principle. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. And Alhamdulillah, now we reach to the end. And I will not make a summary or conclusion as too many things. So I think it's not possible for me to conclude. But all of us agree that this is a very, very fruitful discussion, very knowledgeable discussion. And let me end this session with, you can say, pantun. Yeah, I don't know in English. Yeah, it's a kind like a simple poem. So let me read one of them. Yeah. Go sailing using a boat. Do not forget to stop by in Jambi. We say goodbye, dude. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And back to you, Mrs. Master of Ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Irfan Syaukibeik, for leading such a very constructive discussion, and all the speakers for sharing your invaluable insights. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to present you the video of pre-launching of Indonesia Research Framework for Islamic Economics, Finance, and Halal Science.
Sebagai negara dengan jumlah populasi muslim terbesar, Indonesia memiliki potensi strategis untuk menjadi pusat ekonomi syariah dunia. Pengembangan ekonomi syariah Indonesia perlu didukung oleh riset dan inovasi yang tepat guna dan berbasis perkembangan teknologi terkini dalam rangka memberikan nilai tambah yang tinggi bagi perekonomian nasional. Indonesia saat ini berperan aktif dalam pengembangan riset ekonomi syariah dan menduduki peringkat kedua di dunia untuk bidang riset menurut Islamic Finance Development Indicator (IFDI) 2020. Pada tahun 2021, KNEKS dan IAEI telah menyusun kerangka riset yang dapat dijadikan acuan nasional terkait link and match dalam pengembangan ekosistem riset dan inovasi bidang ekonomi syariah dan industri produk halal di Indonesia. Kerangka riset nasional dan sektor ekonomi syariah. Kerangka ini disusun berdasarkan koordinasi dengan 35 kementerian atau lembaga, 17 pelaku industri, dan 10 asosiasi. Kerangka ini mencakup penyelarasan antara riset ekonomi syariah dengan rencana induk riset nasional 2017-2045 dan prioritas riset nasional 2020 sampai 2024. Pemetaan tema riset yang memiliki dampak tinggi pada pengembangan industri produk halal, keuangan syariah, keuangan sosial syariah, dan bisnis dan kewirausahaan syariah mencakup 13 tema strategis dan 89 subtema di masing-masing sektor ekonomi syariah. Spesialisasi pusat riset maupun pusat studi mencakup 11 pusat riset di bidang ekonomi, keuangan, dan bisnis syariah, 9 pusat riset di bidang sains halal, 58 program atau pusat studi ekonomi syariah dan sains halal. Spesialisasi dari lebih 1084 peneliti di masing-masing sektor ekonomi syariah dan industri produk halal. Kerangka riset sains halal nasional. Kerangka ini mencakup pemetaan tema riset dan inovasi terkait bahan-bahan substitusi non-halal yang bersumber lokal, serta juga dapat berperan sebagai substitusi impor. Tema bahan substitusi mencakup lebih 12 tema strategis dan lebih 247 subtema di sektor makanan minuman, farmasi, dan kosmetik. R&D bidang bahan substitusi dapat memperkuat rantai nilai halal nasional dalam rangka mewujudkan Indonesia sebagai pusat produsen produk halal dunia. R&D dalam pengembangan autentikasi halal berbasis teknologi terkini termasuk IR 4.0. Tema autentikasi halal mencakup lebih 27 tema strategis dan lebih 17 subtema sebagai solusi teknologi dalam mempercepat proses sertifikasi halal serta memperkuat halal traceability. Referensi riset teknologi 4.0 pendukung usaha-usaha syariah. Referensi riset di berbagai klaster teknologi 4.0 yang dapat dikembangkan sebagai solusi dalam rangka memperkuat usaha-usaha syariah, terutama di sektor makanan minuman, fashion, dan pariwisata. Dengan hadirnya kerangka riset nasional ekonomi syariah dan sains halal, diharapkan dapat terwujud suatu ekosistem riset yang kuat, bernilai tambah tinggi, bertaraf internasional, dan berkelanjutan dalam rangka mendukung Indonesia menjadi pusat ekonomi syariah dan pusat produsen produk halal dunia.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of 7th International Islamic Monetary Economics and Finance Conference and the 13th International Conference on Islamic Economics and Finance. Before we close the program completely, now may we call upon the President of International Association for Islamic Economics, Dr. Omar Z. Hafiz, to deliver the closing remarks for the ICIEF 2021.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وإمام المتقين سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear respected participants, it gives me a lot of pleasure to talk to you at this moment where we came to the end of our outstanding event of the 13th International Conference of Islamic Economics and Finance and the 7th International Islamic Monetary Economics and Finance Conference within the Sharia Festival Week in the beloved city of Great Jakarta in the leading and pioneering Indonesia. It worth to mention with honor that the partnership between the International Association for Islamic Economics and Bank Indonesia to jointly organize the event is a unique and wonderful opportunity, providing that such a cooperation is very necessary currently to reach to a common frame for strengthening Islamic economy and financial systems, which is the title of the event. The parties supported and hosted this event in Indonesia and from abroad deserve all appreciations and best wishes from all for their efforts and great initiatives to make the event the most successful one. Originally, the esteemed 5 Indonesian institutions, Bank Indonesia, the Indonesian Association of Islamic Economics, IAEI, the National Islamic Finance Committee, KNEKS, the National Board of Zakah, Business, and IPB University were so supportive in inviting our association to organize this event jointly, and led all the activities of steering committee in addition to I am so confident of saying that their contributions were very vital for the success of the conference. In addition to that, I appreciate the cooperation we got from Indonesia Sharia Economic Festival, ICIEF. At this moment, I cannot forget the promotion and support of the Islamic Development Bank, the Bank of the Muslim Ummah, for the continuous financial and moral supports to all the conferences of the association in different countries for the last 35 years ago. Thanks are also due to King Abdul Aziz University in my country, Saudi Arabia, who organized the first conference of our series in Mecca al-Mukarramah in 1976, and to all countries who followed and hosted our conferences after that to reach its 13th one in Great Indonesia, and looking to move to another hosting country in 2022 next year, inshallah, which we will announce shortly. I take this unique opportunity as I am very sure of the deep interest of Bank Indonesia in the sector of Islamic economics and finance. And I have the honor to call upon His Excellency, Dr. Piri Warigio, the BI Governor, who was so kind to give his keynote speech in the opening session yesterday. I call upon His Excellency to agree to initiate inviting the United Nations Concerned Authority to schedule this day of 26 October as the World Day of Islamic Economics and Finance, because this move will promote this sector globally and organize its roots internationally and support having Indonesia as world hub of Islamic social finance. I hope this proposal finds its way forward, insha'Allah ta'ala. I am so grateful to all who participated by their keynote speeches in all sessions or wrote a paper for the conference. The subjects of discussions were so important and having a lot of insights and recommendations which may help the decision-making authorities in our OIC member countries and all others who became so interested in the Islamic economics and finance. Finally, I would like to assure all participants that the International Association for Islamic Economics, who completed its 37th anniversary in Indonesia this year, is created to serve its goals that will bring prosperity and high quality of well-being to the whole world. and the association welcome all those professionals and others to join the membership of the association, which is free for 1 year in this event, and be part to join hands for prosperity of the world. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Omar Hafiz, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, may we have the honor to invite Director of Bank Indonesia Institute, Dr. Iman Gunadi, for officially announce the best papers of Journal of Islamic Monetary Economy and Finance 2021 and deliver the closing remarks for the 7th IIMEFC 2021.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable President of International Association for Islamic Economics, Dr. Omar Zuhair Hafiz. Distinguished Speaker, Professor Zamir Iqbal from Islamic Development Bank, Saudi Arabia. Professor Muhammad Maksum Billah of King Abdul Aziz University, Saudi Arabia. Dr. Jardin Husman of Bank Indonesia, and the moderator, Dr. Irfan Shauki Beg. I see here also BI former Deputy Governor, Dr. Aslim Tajuddin, colleague and fellow guests from various partners of Bank Indonesia Institute, conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon us. Very good afternoon. First of all, let us extend our praise and gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the Almighty God, because only His blessing and permission we are all being here to partake in the 7th International Islamic Monetary Economic and Finance Conference and the 13th International Conference of Islamic Economic and Finance. Salawat and salam be upon Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the seal of Prophet and the messenger of God. Now we have come to the end of these conferences. We got much fruitful discussion during this two-day event from policymakers and academics who exchanged their view on the relevant topic raised to face our today's challenges in the area of Islamic economic and finance. I'm also pleased to inform you that all discussion that took place in these conferences were witnesses by around 600 participants. On behalf of Bank Indonesia, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all the presenters and participants for their contribution to the success of these conferences. As we have heard over the past 2 days, there were a very good topic we share to all participants. The first topic was Islamic economy, halal economy, and industry for organic growth towards global value chain. And the second topic was Islamic banking and finance for economic recovery and sustainable development in digital era, which were presented by prominent speakers from Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Malaysia, and Indonesia. I'm confident that we also have learned from each other during the series of parallel sessions, read many innovative papers, and receive many valuable review comments. The development of supportive ecosystem of economic policy research, especially in the area of Islamic economy and finance in Indonesia, has been progress. Going forward, to regular our call for papers, we will continue strive to invite quality papers written by both Indonesian and foreign authors. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, finally, I am proudly to announce the best paper for this conference. The best paper for this conference is a paper written by Hasibuana Laraskinanti, Farhan Medio Yudantio, and Rizka Isnaini Husna of Gajah Mada University, Indonesia, entitled Makosid Syariah Compliance, Women's empowerment, and environment sustainability synergism to foster economic development. And the second best paper, written by Rahmawati of University Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, Hairul Azlam Anwar, Hafiz Majdi Abdul Rashid, and Siti Alawiyah Shiroj of International Islamic University Malaysia, entitled The Importance of Islamic Social Capital Information, Stakeholders' Perceptions. Along with this final announcement, I hereby officially close the 7th International Islamic Monetary Economy and Finance Conference and the 13th International Conference of Islamic Economics and Finance 2021, with this theme, Strengthening Islamic Economic and Financial System in the Post-Pandemic Era, Digitalization and Sustainability. Once again, I would like to say thank you very much for coming and for your participation in these conferences. We greatly appreciate the support we have received from the speakers and the participants. We also are grateful to all of those who have been involved in the organization of the event. Since the conference is an annual event, we look forward to seeing you again in 2022. When we shall convene to discuss another topic theme related to Islamic economy and financial system. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless of us. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Iman Gunadi, for the closing remarks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to inform you that the second plenary session materials are available to download by scanning the QR code on the screen. On behalf of the committee, we would like to thank you for your presence and active participation. Hopefully, this event will be beneficial for everybody, especially on the important issues discussed. We hope to see you again in other precious opportunities. Good afternoon and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.